Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. That's Valentine's Day. And, I don't know what to tell you. I guess it means Chris Coons is out the door already. He won't be around, even though there is another impeachment pending. It is also Ash Wednesday, so of course, maybe he's on his way to church. You really can't be sure. Let's not jump to any conclusions today. But, all right, let's jump to conclusions. That's what we do here. There is an impeachment pending. The House actually managed to cobble together a majority, sort of those present and voting anyway yesterday. 214 votes were all that it took to get an impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas through the House of Representatives. 214 to 213. I happened to notice, since a screenshot of the votes from C-SPAN was being circulated on social media yesterday, 2 non-voting Republicans, 2 non-voting Democrats. So I guess had everyone showed up, it still would have produced a majority, presumably, if they had voted along partisan lines. So what would that be? 214, 16, 218 to 214 to 216 to 215. With vacancies, of course. And one of those vacancies was not yet filled, but determined last night. One of the special elections pending yesterday. There were several, around 2 of which I actually remembered what they were. One was, sort of remembered. One was actually for a Pennsylvania state legislative race that would determine the balance of power in the Pennsylvania state legislature. Hey, guess what? It was a special election. And many various issues and factors coming together to damage Republican chances at the polls. We're okay with that. Democrats retaining or regaining, I guess, or securing control of the Pennsylvania state legislature. The one we had our eye more closely on was the special election to replace the guy whose name we don't even know, who was such a huge fraud that we're not even sure if his name was George Santos, though that was the name under which he occupied the seat in New York's 3rd congressional district. And Democrats prevail. Blame it on the snow. Credit it to his aggressive immigration stance. I don't know. That's the job of the people writing the articles like 5 things you need to know about the fact that Tom Suozzi is returning to Congress. That's really the only fact I need to know. It doesn't change the balance of power in the House of Representatives per se, but it does narrow that majority. I think they only have a 2-seat cushion at this point. So, whatever. He'll be sworn in soon, and I guess maybe that was part of the reason why they needed to rush through the impeachment process yesterday in order to make sure that there wasn't an additional Democrat on hand when they cast the vote next time, because, as you know, the vagaries of attendance in the House could have tipped the balance the other way. So, all right, here we stand. And it's not been that long since the Senate was prepared to receive, or about to receive, or had just received an impeachment reference from the House, referral, I guess. I don't know what they actually call it. But at any rate, the papers having been walked over to the other side. And it is now, it's just a few years down the road, but it is Valentine's Day again. I'll never forget. And Joan McCarter will never let us forget, and properly so, that Chris Coons couldn't be held back from his Valentine's Day dinner. I mean, family's important, but there were, of course, no witnesses being called, no testimony being given in the trial of the second impeachment of Donald Trump because, just had to get to dinner that day. So there we are. Okay, let's see. What have we to dive into today. Some interesting observations, actually, from Justice, from his remote perch at the headquarters of Netroots Radio, pointing out that Tommy Looney Tuberville is back in the news. The offhand comment here being that Looney Tuberville, I'm embellishing the name a little bit, had held up all those military staff votes because he's really working for Vladimir Putin. He is, I don't know what to tell you. He's making news in the last couple of days, really like letting himself way out on a limb over issues relating to Russia and Ukraine. Just the top headlines in a search for, okay, what the hell's going on here now? Gives me headlines of Tuberville appears willing to give Putin the benefit of the doubt, which is one of the softer petals of the story. Gop senator says Putin is on top of his game while saying the U.S. forced Russia into the Ukraine war. Wow. So, yeah, he seems to be treading an unusual line for all of this. And then, of course, his vote against the foreign aid to Ukraine and Taiwan, in case you're wondering, and Israel, just to make sure that we get all of the hits in. And then, let's see, what else was on his mind? Oh, yes, back into New York 3. Interesting, good observation. Not one Hamas protester protested Pilip, and she said she was in the IDF. That is interesting that nobody seemed to come out for that one, although I don't know. I wouldn't, I guess I wouldn't have bothered either. There would be very little point in involving yourself in the race. However, that is an interesting observation. All right, and many more to come. The Rafto stories growing as we speak, as Greg prepares to come on here. Oh, he seemed very interested in that last point, Justice, so that made a big hit with him, and he says he was prepared to bring that up himself. All right, so good. We'll dive into that discussion. There's more news, more bad news, I guess, for Bob Menendez. I guess new details is a third superseding indictment, perhaps. In his case, I mean, not too much is going to get more shocking than gold bricks and just cash lying around the house. But, you know, some of the dirtier details about cash stuffed in boots, hidden under coats, which, you know, okay, I don't know what to tell you about that one. And then the interesting twist that some of the people who were bribing him were cheating on the bribes a little bit too, including, and this will upset people a little bit. Not us. I mean, we'll be okay with it, but I upset the Menendez family a little bit. That apparently the engagement ring that he gave to his now wife, Nadine Menendez, she's now Menendez, she's now identified as Ms. Menendez in the New York Times, of course, was apparently, one part of a, bribe menu, essentially. Say, I need various bribes in order to do whatever the hell it is you think you're bribing me to do. And it wasn't all that clear that he delivered very much for those bribes, by the way. But apparently one of them was the engagement ring, which is the sort of thing that ordinarily, you certainly don't want that news to break on Valentine's Day, right? The engagement ring I gave you was given to me by someone else. That is to say, a bribe that I was supposed to use. And then as it turns out, it was, I don't know how to describe it except to say undervalued, I guess. It was represented to, and I feel shocked and dismayed that poor Bob Menendez was lied to about this, but it was represented to him that the value of the ring that he was being presented in order to give to his fiancée so that she would marry him was $35,000, part of a $150,000 package of bribes, of course, also including the new Mercedes convertible to replace the one that she trashed when she ran some guy over in a crosswalk and killed him. But on top of that, the ring purported to be worth $35,000 was in fact worth $12,000, and that apparently the Egyptian-American businessman with whom he had these dealings and who was providing the ring decided, I guess he had a budget. He's budget conscious. He had a budget for the ring, and what he decided to do was, instead of buying a $35,000 ring, he bought a $12,000 ring, and then spent the rest of that money that he had budgeted for it, I guess, for this bribe, at the jeweler buying necklaces and watches for himself and pocketed it. So I like it. Everybody was on the same page, bribe-wise and cheating-wise. Allegedly, I should say, because, well, we're just waiting to find out what the outcome of all of this is. But it's interesting. Interesting, to say the least. Okay, well, Greg Dworkin is here. He's ready to go. There's many stories to review. Let's get started. Good morning and happy Valentine's Day, Greg Dworkin. How are you?
Good morning and happy we won an election last night morning, if for those who celebrate, and I'm one.
Right.
I love doing this show, and there's nothing like getting up in the morning after a big win. So, that's today.
Whee! Yes, I mean, yeah, there isn't. We get up in the morning the day after a big loss, too, as it turns out. And that's
I hate that, too. But, we haven't experienced that lately.
No, it's been great. I'm happy for the streak of wins. Of course, we hope it continues. Let's take them as we get them. And go ahead.
Take a page from
Sure.
Taylor Swift's quarterback of her boyfriend,
Huh?
who said, we're young. We can keep this going. Let's
Yeah.
go and do it again next year.
Oh, yes, right. Yes, I did see that. The post-game jubilant interview. Yeah.
With Patrick Mahomes. It was great.
Yeah, they are. They're young guys. They could get right. And so they're looking for the elusive three-peat.
And why not?
Right. I mean, isn't everybody?
Yeah.
That's the point of the NFL, right? What the hell? How long do you think we should win this? As long as we can.
Yeah. So the New York Times, in regard to Bob Menendez, says, while Hannah, a longtime friend of Ms. Menendez, who's also charged in the alleged conspiracy, attempted to cheat her out of the full value of the ring, as you described. According to court documents filed late Monday by prosecutors in Manhattan. In doing so, Mr. Hannah, an Egyptian-American businessman, because we should always let businessmen run our country, who founded a halal meat company the prosecutors say was used to funnel bribes to the Menendezes, threatened to derail plans for the senator to assist the government of Egypt, part of the complicated plot. He was about to ruin things with Bob, a confidential source who was in touch with Egyptian officials said, according to the government's filing. Bob, who is starting to listen to us.
It is funny that, right, part of the record is, I'm going to screw that guy over. Wait, no, we're finally getting results from our bribes. What are you doing?
Yeah,
well,
this is not the time to do this.
I want money.
Do it next week.
Yeah, right. It's quite bizarre. So, I mean, it's a convoluted story. I don't know. One of those, I guess, no honor among thieves stories. But who thought there was honor?
Yeah, Menendez also requested that, if you're going to try me, don't try me with my wife.
Yeah, right. Don't try me. And neither does she want to be tried with him.
Me.
I noticed in the phrasing in the Times when they were reciting the people who would not comment for the story, a necessary addition to the story. Menendez's lawyers offered no comment. The prosecutors offered no comment, but also Mrs. Menendez's lawyers, note that they are different people, also offered no comment. So that was something to take away too.
So we got to talk a little bit about this New York 3 thing, because it was really fascinating in a lot of ways. Let's start with our old buddy Donald Trump, who rages at foolish GOP candidate who lost race for Santos' New York House seat.
What?
Former President Trump lashed out Tuesday night after Democrats are projected to flip the New York House seat formerly held by disgraced ex-Representative George Santos, R. I guess he speaks pirate.
Right, if he speaks anything at all.
Trump, in a Truth Social post, branded the Republican candidate in the special election a very foolish woman, chiding her for distancing herself from the former president. Republicans just don't learn, but maybe she was still a Democrat. I have an almost 99% endorsement success rate in primaries, if you ignore the ones who I endorsed then lost, and if you ignore the ones who I endorsed the day before the primary when I saw that they were winning. And a very good number in the general elections as well. But just watch this very foolish woman, Mazie Melissa Pilip, running in a race where she didn't endorse me and tried to straddle the fence when she would have easily won if she understood anything about modern-day politics in America.
Yeah, sure. Endorse him. What's the point? doesn't do any good now. He's whatever.
And then
That's not the way it works.
Say MAGA, which is most of the Republican Party, stayed home, and it always will unless it's treated with the respect that it deserves. I stayed out of the race. I want to be loved.
Well, thank you for saying so. At last.
Give us a real candidate in the district.
Tell us about your mother.
Camps. Give us a real candidate in the district for November. Suozzi, I know him well, can be easily beaten. Not so much, buddy. Not so much.
Ay. I just want, that was the one honest part there. I want to be loved.
So, as you pointed out, Phillip has a history, really interesting background. That's what she ran on. She couldn't run on policy. She knows nothing about it. She's like a complete blank slate. She is the quintessential candidate in a box who knows nothing.
Uh-huh.
But she had a great background. She's Ethiopian. She was airlifted out of Ethiopia to save Ethiopian Jews. She went to Israel. She joined the IDF. Now remember this background. Okay, then she comes to the United States and says, I hate anybody who tries to be a asylum seeker.
Yeah, you know what? I hate people who immigrate to the United States. Grr.
But she is IDF, as you pointed out.
Yes.
And there were no protests at her events whatsoever. There were, Free Palestine genocide stuff at Suozzi's victory speech, as there have been throughout, Biden's appearances at unions and so on and so forth. I ask you, why is that? As they like to say on MSNBC.
Know.
Why is that? As Rachel says.
I mean, number of explanations, I suppose.
Far left, the Democratic Party must be destroyed. The Lenda Est, Carthage must be destroyed.
Yeah.
Plus, perhaps foreign national backers, perhaps some Republican backers. There's stuff about this movement that just smells to high heaven, smells even worse than Trump. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It makes no sense whatsoever that they don't show up at somebody who campaigned on being stronger for Israel than Suozzi.
Yeah.
Like, what's up with that?
I imagine a good deal of it is, in fact, there'd be good reason to be suspicious of it. There's also, some of the factor is occasionally, like, there will be people who are relatively, honest in their approach to the protests, and they simply say, I'm only going to put pressure on somebody that I think will actually perhaps respond, somebody who will feel pressure and say, well, I'm doing my best for you, or even yell back at us, whereas yelling at a Republican to come to your position is usually pointless. Also, they may have sense that she was going to lose.
Let me tell you a little bit about this community here.
Yeah, they didn't have to travel to do this. You could have just crossed the street and said, "Oh, we can protest an actual IDF
you can do
soldier
both.
here." Right?
Go from one to the other.
Yeah, but
of course, she would have had to leave the district to go see Phillip because she wasn't in the district the night she lost.
Well,
she was next door. So this is from Newsday, and it's actually a real estate discussion of the Great Neck Peninsula, which is where this district is in Nassau. Now, this is like
what a great neck it is.
85% Long Island, L-O-N-G-U-Y-L-A-N-D,
Right.
Long Island.
Right.
85% is in Nassau County. And then 15% is in Queens. Queens is incredibly diverse here. The people in Queens, that's where you go to shop for food because, like, you have everything.
Okay.
Sure. And so, 40% white, 40% Oriental / Asian / AAPI. You have some Hispanic. You have some Black. Incredibly diverse area in Queens. Queens is Democratic. Queens went fairly heavily for Suozzi, but it's only 15% of the vote. Okay. Nassau decides what happens here. And this is a description of the Great Neck Peninsula. Between 2000 and 2017, Great Neck's Asian population more than doubled, which is why Grace Meng from the neighboring district was working so heavily on Suozzi's behalf, and it worked. They rose from being 7% of the population to 18%, according to U.S. Census estimates. In 2017, 27.8% of Asians were under the age of 18. Meanwhile, the white population decreased from 32,000 to 29,000, or from 81% to 72%. In 2017, only 12% of non-Hispanic whites were 18 or younger. During the same period, the Hispanic population dropped from 6% to 3%. The black population declined from 4% to 3%. So what happened is a lot of AAPI and what they like to call themselves Persian Jews, Iranian Jews, they don't like to call themselves Iranian, moved into the area. The Great Neck Peninsula, with more than 41,000 residents, has also seen its population of Orthodox Jews, Iranian Jews who refer to themselves as Persians, and other Middle Eastern Jews, in other words, Sephardic Jews, grew, according to local residents interviewed for the story. Bukharian Jews, many of whom immigrated to the U.S. and settled in Queens after the Soviet Union collapsed, have also moved to the peninsula. And there's at least 20 synagogues, 2 kosher supermarkets, a kosher butcher shop, and more than a dozen kosher food establishments on the peninsula. Great Neck has 3 mikvahs, indoor pools with Orthodox Jewish women immerse themselves for ritual purification, an eruv, a symbolic religious boundary that makes it possible for Orthodox Jewish residents to carry certain items outside their homes and engage in activities such as pushing a stroller on the Sabbath, covers most of the peninsula except for the village of Lake Success. Lake Success is the area that Long Island Jewish is at, and North Shore Hospital. In Newsday's paired testing of real estate agents on Long Island, the population shift in Great Neck was referenced by some agents as they spoke with customers. Any community you live in is going to undergo changes. Things evolve. And Great Neck has become more diverse. And that's true. It starts south of the Long Island Expressway in the village of Lake Success, stretches all the way to the affluent village of Kings Point, the inspiration for F. Scott Fitzgerald's town of West Egg in The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
So Great Gatsby, North Shore,
that.
very, 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 very wealthy. And then the district stretches all the way down to Manhasset and Levittown, which is middle class still. So, you know, it's an incredibly diverse ethnic district, absolutely representative of a New York suburb. And it's just fascinating in terms of how this ran. First of all, Tom Suozzi did not run away from immigration issues. Again, for those who are not that familiar, Eric Adams, the Democratic in name only mayor of New York City, has been fighting a battle with Greg Abbott from Texas because Abbott ships migrants from Texas and literally dumps them in New York, who then have to feed and house them. Which is why, by the way, in the border bill that was rejected by the Republicans in the Senate, it was so important that work permits were increased in that bill because, as Catherine Rampell pointed out in the Washington Post, immigrants and migrants are responsible for a $7 trillion boost in the economy. What happens is these folks want to work, they want to eat, they want to work, and so they do, and they contribute everything, including taxes, to your local economy. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. It's a plus, not a minus.
Okay.
So that's happening, but although crime in New York has actually been dropping, there have been some very prominent stories of migrants beating up cops and a couple of other incidents. And so the migrant/crime issue was very salient for this district, as was abortion. But you won't hear about that from the press. The press only talks about migrants and crime because that's the kind of stuff you can actually put on TV. Unless there's a march or, you know, some kind of protest, there's no visuals to go with abortion as salient. So you don't see it. You don't hear about it. Suozzi's well aware of it. He put a ton of advertising into the abortion issue. And the idea that, well, it doesn't matter in New York State because it's blue and nobody cares. Absolutely untrue. It's part of how he won. Okay. But as far as the migrant issue goes, as the New York reporters all say, he didn't avoid it. He leaned into it. Okay. He said, look, we're trying to fix something my Republican colleagues don't want to do anything. They just want to use it as an issue. I understand with all you folks here. I mean, half of you are immigrants yourselves. You understand it's a major issue. We want to do this peacefully without crime, this, that, and everything else. I'm part of the solution. I support the bill that the Republicans killed in Congress. My opponent not only won't commit to where she is on the bill, she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't know anything about anything, which you saw in the debate we had, because I asked her a ton of questions and she wouldn't answer them. So I am your solution. She is your problem. That's how he ran on the immigration issue, and he won. Mm-hmm. And, the way we know he won is some of the quotes that some of the reporters got out of people who were, interviewing people at the time.
Exit interviews?
This is man on the street interviews. Washington Post. The victory also validated Suozzi's decision to invest heavily in countering the GOP and immigration, suggesting the Democrats in tight races can benefit from talking tougher on the border and highlighting Republicans' abrupt abandonment of a bipartisan deal in the matter negotiated in Congress. Biden, Kathy Hochul, the governor, and other Democrats have similarly sought to go on offense on immigration by criticizing the deal's failure. Now, as an aside, they didn't put a ton of money in advertising on this because it happened too recently and adults learn by repetition, and their campaign said we simply didn't have time to repeat it enough to make sure everybody understood it. But this was the issue. And here's a Suozzi supporter quoted, Maria DeLuca said she heard a lot of negativity toward his stance on immigration, but decided she preferred moderation to the Republicans' hard line. Suozzi said it would protect us, but also be fair. Okay. That's how you win.
Well, at least in that district, and I mean,
in every
it's an interesting one.
People are okay with fairness. They want toughness, but they want fairness.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on. There's probably more to say about this very weird district.
Oh, so much more. It's just so much of an interesting place. Some spots on Long Island, says the Washington Post, reported several inches of snow Tuesday as both the Suozzi and Pilip campaigns organized free rides to the polls and urged their supporters to get out as conditions improved in the afternoon. By about 1 o'clock, the snow had let up a little bit. Mm-hmm. There was almost no turnout in the morning. But it turned out that the turnout was about two-thirds of 2022. So this was not a low turnout election favoring energized Democrats, which is the current line going around. This is actually a very good turnout for a special where there's no top-line ticket.
Okay.
And the Democrats won going away. I mean, just to give you an idea of the size of the win, Queens, the 15% portion of the district, which is typically more Democratic than the island, was like Biden, I think, +4, or maybe this was the race with Santos, where his opponent was a +4 in Queens, but Santos was +10 on the Nassau side, the 85%.
Okay.
In this election, Suozzi won Queens by something like 29.
Okay.
And he won the Nassau side 53-47.
Okay.
So that's like a 16-point flip.
All right.
Okay, so this wasn't just turnout, is what I'm trying to say. And no, the weather didn't have anything to do with it whatsoever.
All right.
So you can't use those as excuses.
I don't know.
In fact,
they had already written
when it comes to the weather, this is actually really funny. The Congressional Leadership Fund,
Yes.
which is a national Republican super PAC, hired private snowplow companies to clear the roads in Republican areas to try to get their people out. I mean, they were desperate to win.
I guess so. Well, it didn't work.
Right? Voters at one polling site held each other's hands and clung to the railings to avoid slipping. So the weather was
Like
not
Trump.
good, but it didn't stop people. And here's the key part. Democrats outspent Republicans in the race about $14 million worth compared to $8 million for Republicans. But the GOP ads overwhelmingly focused on immigration, blaming the border crisis on Democrats. And Suozzi responded with his own spots, said that he once joined Republicans to vote in support of immigration and customs enforcement. And, he took a relatively conservative line, but, he triangulated and it worked.
Okay.
And so Frank Luntz writes, Democrats just flipped George Santos's New York 3 House seat. Tonight is the final wake-up call for the House GOP. If they ignore or attempt to explain away why they lost, they'll lose in November as well. The issue agenda is on their side. The congressional behavior is not, but don't mistake tonight's result as an endorsement of Biden. It's a rejection of House Republican chaos.
Oh.
Congressional
Okay.
Republicans gave voters nothing to vote for. I read this and said, so the caravans would have won it for us just like it did for Ed Gillespie, except for it didn't.
That minor detail.
But don't mistake tonight's win for an actual loss.
No.
That's what he's saying.
Not that. Okay. Sure.
All right? So, in other words, the immigration issue was the thing that was going to win it for them, and it did not. And sure, you could get really mad at Chris Murphy for negotiating with Republicans over this Senate bill that, quote, gave away too much, end quote. And then you go look at this district and say, basically Suozzi won by running on that bill. And so what are you doing? That's what you're doing. And why are you doing it? That's why you're doing it. You may dislike it. This is where politics comes in over the policy you wish you had, but this is where the voters are at. And so, if you want to win elections, you got to do some things that you're not going to like, and this is one of them. And it worked.
Okay. Well, lessons
Suozzi
learned,
votes
maybe?
with Biden 100% of the time when he was in Congress with Biden together.
Well,
Is he too conservative for you? Probably, but what does that mean? I don't care what he says. I care what he does.
Yeah, right. And I mean, look, he's handed his legislation not handed to him by Biden, but I mean, look, he may himself be more conservative, but if what he's being handed to vote on are things that I am hoping, votes that I hope that Biden will be able to win, that's the guy you want, I guess.
Yeah. This is a watch what I do, not what I say kind of thing. So, and the important lesson here isn't Frank Luntz's lesson from it.
Oh, no, never
It's
is.
what Suozzi actually did, okay? Because the Republicans came in saying the caravans are going to win it for us in Virginia, and Suozzi said no, because they're not being fair. And by the way, since we're talking about fairness, let's talk about abortion. And he highlighted that really, really heavily. The New York 3 special election needs to be about abortion, read a bold underlined sentence in an internal Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee memo, which cited national Democrats polling on the effectiveness of targeting Phillip over that issue because she refused to commit herself one way or the other, like she did on just every issue because she was an empty, skirt. Biden's campaign manager suggested in a statement Tuesday that voters on Long Island had rejected Trump's extreme agenda while Trump attacked Phillip as a foolish woman who didn't express sufficient support for him. So, in other words, what Democrats need to do is what Suozzi did. You attack me on this, I'm going to counter you and then pivot to the issues that I'm strong on.
All right.
And I'm not ignoring the issues I'm strong on, which is what Democrats care about. But I'm telling you, I'm not going to back off and not talk about the issues Republicans want to, because Democrats want to talk about something else. I'm not just going to talk about what Democrats do. I'm going to counter what Republicans do and then talk about what Democrats want to. That works.
Appears to have done that. There's going to be a lot of lessons drawn from it. I guess the thing I was marveling over was, I guess the copy was already written that the weather was a major factor, so they just kept it in all the stories of what you need to understand about
the weather. Sucked, but that wasn't the issue. I would.
I can't imagine.
Way. The weather was really bad. In fact, people were holding on to each other so that they didn't slide away from the polling areas.
Yeah, well,
college-educated Democrats who live in this area would crawl through snow and a blizzard to vote against these Republicans.
Yeah, and so they did.
And
they held on to one another as they did it. So, okay, just, I guess, ignore the dumb punditry.
Are tough, but so are New Yorkers. They could deal with snow.
And they did. That's true. They're much more.
They just yell at the mayor.
What are you doing? Yeah. So okay. Well, I don't know. I guess we'll take that at face value, except for the snow part, and head to the next election. Now everything may have flipped before then. You never know. And I mean, every time, if you need something to keep wringing your hands about, you never know that these issues come and go.
They do, but the fun part is
stepping
back and watching the political reporters in the news media rewriting their narrative in their head,
or not rewriting it at all.
It just didn't fit.
Yeah, or sticking with it because I already wrote about the snow.
Right.
It was very weird. Okay, well,
Nate
yes.
Cohn, had a very interesting piece in the New York Times about it. And he points out correctly, I think, that House polls are very noisy. They're typically off by about 6 points. So the polls had correctly pointed out that Suozzi was going to win, probably by around 4 points. Turns out he's going to win by around 8, 7 points something in the end.
Okay.
And so Nate Cohn writes, well, this was not an ordinary special election, but it was a typical result. Democrats claim another victory. It doesn't necessarily add more clarity about November. And that's true in the sense it doesn't predict who's going to win, but it does tell you, because both Republicans and Democrats use this race to field test their messages. It does tell you about what does and doesn't work. And it does tell you a little bit about how Democrats and Republicans might adjust for the fall. Of course, Republicans won't, because Frank Luntz. We had the right message. It just didn't win. We have to do the same thing, but differently to get a different result instead of the same result, which is what are you talking about?
I don't know.
I don't know. So the less Democratic county of the district turned out to be about a D+5 in turnout. The actual electorate, including Queens, which is more Democratic, was probably around D+7. And in 2022, it was much more Republican. Now, there were a couple of reasons for that, but one of the things that, you try to glean from these sort of things is what does this tell you about who's going to come out and vote? Are Democrats actually going to show up? And the answer is yes. Well, what about the fact that they don't like Biden? There's plenty of people who don't like Biden who are going to vote for him. Whether you like him or not is not really the proper question.
No.
Is he too old? Well,
they say
better 81 years than 91 indictments is what I say.
That's good.
That's my bumper
That may
sticker.
Even be bumper stickerable.
That's my bumper sticker for 2024.
I like it. Better 81. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, we'll see if we can work on.
Look, he's old. I get it. So what?
Yeah, right.
As a New Yorker might say.
Okay.
So freaking what? What are you trying to tell me?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see. I like it, though. 81, 91, 91, then. Works out nicely.
This compliment comes from a professional, as David actually used to write this kind of copy at one point in his life. I don't know if people know that, but it was another part of your background.
Yes, right. Prior life.
Prior life.
Okay, yeah, but I like that. It rolls off. It's nicely
So
done. Yes.
in 2022, Long Islander Lee Zeldin ran a strong race against Democrat Kathy Hochul for governor.
He ran a race. It's true.
He ran very strongly in Long Island as
Very
part of the
strongly.
way George Santos won. It was the top of the ticket,
He
pulling
lost
the people
very strongly.
below him. He had coattails.
Yeah, well.
All right.
Not his
So
own.
my point is, what do you think is the real 2024 electorate? The 2022 one? This one? The 2021? This one was just like 2020. You can't just look at the special election and say, well, it's special. It's totally divorced from anything that happened before. Actually, it looks very much like 2020.
Okay.
When Biden won.
And George Santos.
Yeah. In
Oh, no.
2022.
22. Yeah, right. Yes, it's a weird place. Turnout will matter, certainly.
New York's always weird. It's got a little bit of everything. But, what I'm saying is that, remember Simon Rosenberg, the hopium guy? There's absolutely no way to look at this race and fret about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just all the information here is good. It doesn't prove a thing, but there's nothing bad in this data.
All right.
In these results.
Yeah. Okay. Even Frank Luntz can't find it.
Yeah. Well, the only thing Luntz can say is we should have done the same thing over and it would have had a different result sometime.
Yeah. Well, in some simulations, it's true.
So what's my point there?
I'm not sure.
The Republicans make a lot of noise about immigrants and crime.
Yes. True.
And the media picks up on that. That's all they talk about. Dobbs actually was one of the things that decided this election. And they still don't get it. The media doesn't get it. Republicans don't get it. They think somehow it's going to go away. It's not. Not even in a blue state like New York.
Okay.
Does it bring people out to the polls still? Why, yes, it does. Even in a snowstorm.
Are you sure? How can you be so sure? Is it just photos of people actually coming out and records
interviewing
to tell
them
us
saying,
that
well, this
it's
matters
true?
to me.
And all right. Well, I was just going to say, how come people didn't
what'll
know
happen?
the snow
People
was
will
coming
interview
early?
folks and they'll talk about, how Tom Suozzi flipped the switch on the border issues and completely ignore Dobbs. That's what's going to happen in the next couple of days. That's why I'm making a point of saying it now.
Okay.
He put tons of money into advertising about it. It mattered. It helped him win.
Yeah.
Well, fine. Look, if they don't want to get it and they don't want to talk about it, that's okay with me. They're going to be surprised in November, too.
Yes, sure. And I guess, I don't know, especially if Luntz continues giving them their advice, they're going to continue to think that they're just that close to turning immigration back to their advantage 100% of the time.
Yeah, well, they should have called the caravans. So Joshua Smithley, writing on Twitter, says, with 100% of precincts reporting, the tentative final result for Pennsylvania House 140 are as follows. The Democrat, Jim Prokopiak, 67%. Candace Cavanas, 32%. That's a D plus 35 in the end. An absolutely astonishing overperformance in this Biden plus 10 seat by roughly 25 points.
Well.
Also in Oklahoma, there was a state election, a big Trumpy area where the Republican only won by about 5 points.
Oh. Well, I guess, so they expected a larger margin of victory and, didn't need it, but didn't get it. And
right. So getting back to Pennsylvania, Josh Smithley, who follows this stuff very closely, says, I cannot understate what a massacre this is. Easily the biggest blowout overperformance in any Pennsylvania special since I started covering elections here. And this is a suburban seat, respectable 25% turnout, given the situation. So people are turning out. Democrats are turning out. Nobody wants Biden. Get over it. It's going to be Biden-Trump. And I'll tell you the one area that Trump continues to be underestimated.
Where Trump is underestimated? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
He turns out Democrats.
Okay, I was kind of racking my brain. Well, what? What? Oh, I see. The opposite.
He is a turnout machine.
Yeah.
For who?
Yeah, well,
look at those rallies. Yeah, well, look at those votes.
Right. I guess that's true. Well, there's no votes cast at rallies, as we know. The yard signs do vote, but the rallies do not.
Right. It's also the rallies of the same people.
Yes, that's true too. A huge
place to place to place to place.
I see this reported more and more now. I guess this is the value of sending the same reporters to the same places over and over again. And I guess eventually we're going to find out these same people are in every diner, no matter what state I'm going to. And this is weird. They travel with me, but. Yeah, a lot of reporters pointing out, I've now been to enough Trump rallies to be able to recognize the people, that they're the same people, and in some cases actually do travel from state to state to go to these rallies, which is weird because every time I go, I have to report that they all get bored and leave early, and yet they come back anyway. I'm not really certain what's going on here.
Anyway. That's what I found interesting. Let's talk about some other stuff.
All right. What else is there, really?
Well,
honestly?
Dominating the news, there was AP's afternoon alert. Biden says Trump's sowing doubts about U.S. commitment to NATO is un-American.
Well, it is.
3 days in a row it was on the nightly news, and NPR was covering it. And it's a big deal. First, it was because Trump said it. The second night of news was because Europe didn't like it. The third night of news is Biden calls him out on it. Mm-hmm. And so, again, repetition. You got to get this stuff in there, to the point where Trump actually and his allies were actually trying to cover for him. Mm. So they can't just ignore that. And, that's going to be important. Something else that happened is this stupid impeachment.
Oh, yeah. Barely, but it did. It happened.
Right. Judy Chu from California, Democrat, has COVID, so she wasn't there. And I forgot who, but there was somebody from Florida, I think, because of the snow, couldn't get back. So there were two Democrats missing. There were two Republicans missing. You pointed this out at the beginning of the show.
Yes.
But the fact that they impeached him is going to be one of those so what? Somebody had a picture of Mayorkas with a cup of coffee reporting to work this morning. Like, it didn't make any difference.
Yeah, the Kermit the Frog tea sipping meme.
Yeah.
All right. He is. He's technically impeached. It'll be very interesting to see whether they try to do anything weird or different with it when it gets to the Senate, or whether they just say,
there's so many things they could do, including dismiss it altogether. My best guess is they send it back to committee because I don't really understand how things work. But that's like your go-to. Well, that's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean. It's a thing you can do. Although I don't know whether it's difficult to say. You could have a good debate with your consultants over this one. Should we do something to bury it, or should we say, all right, fine, we'll schedule a trial. It'll take a day, and it'll be embarrassing, and we'll have a vote just like we have a vote with everything.
Will shut down because they don't have that much time.
No, that's true.
It's not like there's a lot of time to fit
we
this
do
stuff
have that.
In.
Yes, and I did see somebody pointing out, several in social media discussing the whole situation and saying, well, and this is certainly a point that I've harped on quite a bit too, that this idea of, I remember, I'm so old, I remember when the professional political media said, oh no, my goodness, no, an impeachment like this following an impeachment from the other party so closely, why, that's what we would call a tit-for-tat impeachment. It cheapens the whole thing. Everyone knows it's political suicide to engage in a tit-for-tat impeachment. Oh, did you say Republicans were doing it? It is a genius strategy, in fact. This is excellent. It won't come to much, but that's only because Democrats will cover for, I don't know. So anyway, now tit-for-tat impeachment has become an acceptable tactic. It used to be political death, but that was because Democrats were thinking of impeaching somebody. But I did see a lot of people pointing out that, this could be, under ordinary circumstances, would be viewed as totally illegitimate and would actually be a political liability. And yet, Republicans apparently still contemplating, how can we get here on a Biden impeachment before November? We want him to go into
as if that's
the
going
election.
to work.
Yeah. I mean, you might be able to do it on a day when certain Dems are sick.
Caravans, it's our only chance.
Yeah, and I mean, they've already impeached somebody for that, but we're going to impeach another guy for it too, because that'll totally make sense to a lot of people.
Yeah, for that one, they certainly don't have the votes. Not after Suozzi gets back, for sure. And I want to get this in here because otherwise I'll forget.
Oh.
Lisa Rubin says, per NBC News, Judge Engoron's ruling in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud suit against Donald Trump, his sons Don Jr. and Eric, former CFO Alan Weisselberg, and others, expected Friday.
Hey. That's, I still have to wait a little bit on that one. But
but for your show on Friday morning,
sure,
just remember
I'll have something
that is going to be, get rid of Trump's business day.
Okay, I'll mark it down. We'll make some space for that one. Judge Kaplan finally entered the judgment against him in the Jean Carroll case end of last week.
Right.
So
now
all the money
he's
a debtor.
A court-admitted rapist.
Yes, true. But something, the law doesn't apply to me.
So, a couple of other things I came across, by the way, in terms of New York 3 that I thought were interesting. This is a reporter on CNN who says, I talked to voters today who voted for Donald Trump previously and now voted Democratic because they think Republicans can't govern.
Well, they can't. They don't
I
want
know,
to.
but it's getting through. Isn't that
interesting? I see. Yes. Right. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, you know that. I know that. But apparently the voters know that now.
I need to remember that sometimes people are late to that party. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. They interviewed that one guy. Does he eat in diners?
I don't know. Well,
we hope so.
Everybody's in diners.
And speaks loudly. I hope he talks out loud while he eats.
Right. Tom Bonnier had a couple of observations about New York 3 yesterday. He says, here's a few hot New York 3 takes. It appears.
So, yes.
And he's the guy that covers all the early vote stuff, which actually was really helpful because we knew that he was Suozzi was the Democrat was banking up a whole bunch of votes, which really came in handy when the snow came. Not that it mattered, but a few hot New York 3 takes. It appears the polls had a pro-GOP bias again. Immigration backfired for the GOP, especially in context of their legislative failure. Hence that person that they interviewed that said, I can't. The GOP doesn't govern. GOP turnout suffered, but not enough to explain the margins. Suozzi won a lot of independents and a decent number of GOPs. That means persuasion. The GOP has yet to find a position on abortion rights that will help save them. AAPI voters, key to Democratic victories in 2020, clearly helped deliver the seat. Thank you, Grace Mang. The early vote analysis, what Nate Silva referred to as smoking hopium, proved useful and predictive in this race.
Wow. Well, it's a hot therapy, smoking.
And he said this was written last night before he went to bed. I'll share more thoughts tomorrow morning when the smoke clears, but for now, thank you for following. And you know what? It's not hopium if, in fact, you win.
Well, or at least it's an effective treatment. I guess. I mean, yes, it's a derogatory label that he ought to rethink because the results are in, and he's going to want to, you would think, calibrate to reality. But right. I think he's become a post-reality pundit.
So this morning, Tom says, thinking about this 8-point win in New York 3, where no poll predicted more than 4. Again, there's always a margin of error.
Somebody must have.
In the polls here. I can't help but think that just maybe we shouldn't be basing our entire frame for the 2024 election on the poll responses of tiny poll subgroups with response rates of less than 1%. Just a thought.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with congressional level polling. As you say, they're noisy, and it's noisy because it's difficult to get or they don't bother getting very big samples because it's a small voting population to begin with, so they get away with a smaller sample, but maybe they shouldn't.
Right. Meanwhile, this is from Jake Sherman, and we'll end the show with this.
Okay, I will too.
Jake Sherman says, a healthy round of finger-pointing this morning among Republicans here on Capitol Hill this morning about New York 3. Remember, Jake Sherman speaks to Republicans, and Republicans speak to Jake Sherman. I'll give you an example of that. A healthy round of finger-pointing this morning among Republicans. So far, I've heard people say Nassau County GOP machine is useless after supporting Phillip and Santos. It was vaunted. It was dominating the last election. Now it's useless.
That's true. It was vaunted earlier this week, wasn't it?
Yes.
They said
people
that was
blame the
word.
leadership. It was the secret weapon that was going to win it for Philip, even though nobody knew who she was. People blame the leadership. People blame Philip herself. That's where Trump comes in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
For hiding out and not raising enough cash. And then Representative Mike Collins, Georgia 10, answers Sherman and says, certainly no need to blame Republicans who voted to expel the Republican who won the seat. That's his explanation for what happened.
I see.
Right? It's all Kevin McCarthy's fault. He allowed George Santos to, why did George Santos get expelled? Because the rest of the New York delegation, including his neighbors on Long Island,
right,
Republicans who represent districts on Long Island, wanted him out because they were going to kill him in the next election. And he still might.
Yeah.
Some of those guys may still lose.
Entirely
and that's especially true because you have to remember that by the end of the month, we may hear about the new redistricting in New York that's coming.
I don't think I was following that. Okay.
So some of these
Long
Island districts that are heavily Republican may not be so heavily Republican by the time the new districts are done. And they will be done in time for this election.
Okay. I'll be anxious to see how they draw the lines. I've been examining the lines very closely. My wife was from Long Island, but just outside of this district, south of Merrick Road, you see, next district over. So, South Shore, Long Island, different, but not that far different in terms of partisanship, but different group of people for different reasons voting Republican.
Right.
All right. Very good. Wow. Whoops. I almost forgot. We got to get this music rolling so we know when the hell to get out of here. We got another day.
The time to get
mop
out of
up,
here is
though.
now. But
Yeah,
we'll talk more tomorrow.
Well timed then. I'm going to end the show too. What the hell? You said we should. Not really. We have another hour to go here, but we got you get the bat cleanup tomorrow. There'll be more news. There's probably still be some New York 3 fallout. Lots of finger pointing. I'm not going to tell you which finger I'm pointing at those guys.
I want to know why they don't protest Republicans.
All right, everybody. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You caught us at the end there. We were still chatting about what was going on. Did you know the snow was extremely important? He was hiding the ball on that one. And he came back and said it was all true, just like they wrote in the newspapers. They just didn't want to do it. Anyway, many other stories here. As we were saying, there was lots of finger pointing going on here. Now, the second half of the show, we're going to be pointing the next finger down the line at these Republicans. First, we were trying to just indicate who was responsible for things, and the next finger is about how we feel about their responsibility for those things. All right. Well, it is true. They have, in fact, A, won that special election, and B, impeached at the same time Alejandro Mayorkas. And I don't know. I put aside a story about it in the New York Times, but it looks extensive, and it occurs to me that there's just not that much to say about it, except that it is garbage from top to bottom, and they barely scraped by. And I really, I am unsure how the Senate is going to handle it. That's kind of intriguing. I'd like to see some insight into whether or not they decide to treat it as the joke it is, or whether they think because it's such a joke, they can just take it to the floor and dispense with it quickly in a day or so and be finished with it that way. It looks just like every other impeachment and ends just like every other impeachment. It's just that this one happens faster because it was dumber. Or whether they bottle it up in committee because it's not a presidential impeachment. I mean, you're not going to have the whole same show. The Chief Justice isn't going to show up. He doesn't go unless it's a presidential impeachment. So it's not particularly exciting. We'll see whether the network, I guess we'll see what gets offered for coverage and then see how the networks respond to it. But keep in mind that one of the things that they can do with it is hold the entirety of the trial in committee and then simply make a recommendation to the full body as to what they ought to do and hold one quick vote on it with no additional testimony or I suppose there will be some debate on it, certainly, but there need not be, and people might want to avoid involving themselves in it. Okay, let's see. Other stories that we have to share here, and there are many. We have at least, let's see, a few court case updates. Just for the record, Trump has, in fact, asked the Supreme Court once again to step in on his behalf and block the D.C. Circuit Court's ruling that he has no presidential immunity, or that there is no such thing anyway, as the presidential immunity as he defines it in his January 6th criminal case, looking for, I hope, I guess we all anticipated he would appeal it because it's a thing you can do if you don't mind spending other people's money on losing. So, just by way of update, the CNN story on the topic from yesterday when it was filed, Trump on Monday asked the Supreme Court to step into the charged dispute over whether he may claim immunity from prosecution, once again pressing the 9 justices to resolve a question that could undermine his campaign for a second term. And apparently he's annoying the court with this. They were really hoping that he would take the hint and leave them out of it. But, he's just looking for delay. He's not looking to actually win. If he wins, terrific. But I don't know that he expects it. He just wants to be able to say, I'm letting things play out in court. So let's see. Trump asked the Supreme Court to temporarily block that scathing and unanimous decision, as they put it here, from the D.C. Circuit handed down last week that flatly rejected his claims of immunity from election subversion charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith. By the way, I need to credit John, is it Fritz or Fritzy, Fritze of CNN, for the story I'm reading here. Conducting a months-long criminal trial of President Trump at the height of election season will radically disrupt President Trump's, it's former President Trump, if anything, but this is his own brief, so he loves to call himself that, will disrupt his ability to campaign against President Biden, Trump's attorneys wrote in their request, but so what? The D.C. Circuit ruling threatens immediate irreparable injury to the First Amendment interests of President Trump and tens of millions of American voters who are entitled to hear President Trump's campaign message as they decide how to cast their ballots in November. By the way, no presidential candidate, I think, has ever been more uniquely, let's say, untethered by the demands of schedule when it comes to campaigning for president. No president in history has ever had their own social media platform. Of course, there hasn't been social media for that many presidencies, but he's made unique use of various platforms, including one he owns, or whatever, that is named, or he's the named owner for it. I don't know how much of it he actually owns anymore, but at any rate, it is always referred to as his own social media platform, and he can get almost every news outlet in America to reprint his garbage verbatim because it's in social media. That's one of the things that we haven't spent a great deal of time examining. The fact that he can issue press releases in easily reproducible visual form is very interesting. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon because the way that at least the online versions of major media have used social media is, although they quote him extensively, and the body of the articles always carry the worst parts usually of his social media posts, they very frequently will illustrate the piece, at least online, by simply grabbing a screenshot of the same post and reprinting it, even though they've quoted the thing extensively in the body. So it's interesting that they use the visual element there. They think to illustrate, just to add some visual interest to the story, but it has the impact of, one, putting the message through unfiltered, even in the middle of their filter, which is amazing. And I think they realize that, and I think that's the power of it, and it's why they invested the money that they did, or stole money from other people and invested it into creating this platform that nobody reads. So, I don't know. It's a weird thing. Like, you can get every news, you know how he is, where, what's the saying? Or there's no such thing as bad publicity, right? He sort of subscribes to that. Every time I say something crazy, it gets printed in every newspaper in America, and it's branded with a Trump brand on it. It has the name Trump all over it. In this case, it has the Truth social media branding as well, which everybody kind of knows is his, although he could have named it Trump Truth Media or something like that, just so that the name would be in there. But every time he says something crazy enough for the news to cover it, it's a branding opportunity for him. And I said it's interesting because, technically the ability existed before social media and certainly before Truth Social, right? When you would put out a press release, it would prompt a news story, but very rarely, if ever, did I see newspapers taking pictures of the press release and then printing that press release in the body or even online, including the body of the press release. Now, occasionally that does happen now where they just sort of link to it, or they will put it in Scribd or something and embed it in there, particularly if it's a letter of some kind as opposed to a press release. But that was always an available option. It was just, for some reason, the media never thought to do it. And it wasn't something I felt like it was that we were missing either, until now, when I realized that every story about Donald Trump is embellished with a branding opportunity and an opportunity for Trump to speak to his audience, either the audience that follows him because they love him or the audience that follows him because they hate him. Either way, both are addressed directly right in the thing that we used to think of as the gatekeeper and the filter. They all say, well, we'll give you our filtered view of what he's doing here, but just in case you wanted to know, here's the unfiltered view. And was that ever the case? Whether it doesn't even matter. I was going to say it's certainly not the case though with Democratic communications, but probably the same for most Republican communications. You'd put out a press release, but it was a regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill, routine, mundane press release, and they did in some cases, back in the olden days, get printed on paper and distributed. But now, even so, they're distributed electronically. It's just that much easier to embed it in a story, and they never do. Even now, they still don't do it. But if you tweet it, then you will. So, I guess that's part of the explanation for why so many politicians adapted to social media and adopted the use of social media for so much of their communications. I guess it's available to everybody now, but it's available with Elon Musk's branding on it, as opposed to Donald Trump, who has his own bespoke edition that will have his own branding on it. I think that's very interesting. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. We were talking about the fact that he's filed his appeal. I guess the fact that I've spent so long talking about something else will tell you what's really going on here, which is to say this was expected. It probably won't go anywhere. There's no real reason, no legal reason to believe that the Supreme Court would want to take this up or has anything different to say than what was said at the D.C. Circuit Court. So under normal circumstances, we'd say no, they'd probably just deny cert and say the D.C. Circuit's decision stands. As far as we're concerned, that's the law. That's the right interpretation. And we leave it at that. But, situation is different these days, and the political action of the court is that much more visible, and they apparently love being in the spotlight for these things. So maybe they'll take it up, maybe they won't. Apparently there was one part of the Trump pleadings which stood out, which was probably as annoying to the members of the court. The case has already made its way to the Supreme Court once before. You'll recall that in December, the justices rejected a request from the prosecuting side, from Smith, to leapfrog the D.C. Circuit and have the immunity question decided on an expedited basis by the Supreme Court directly. At the time, the court did not explain its reasoning, and there were no noted dissents, but they probably had a pretty good sense of how quickly the D.C. Circuit was going to take it up and what they were going to do with it. Trump's lawyers referenced the earlier decision in the very first line of their brief, quoting the renowned late Yankees catcher Yogi Berra, saying, "This application is deja vu all over again," which ordinarily would probably make you think, okay, well then don't make it. During more than 2 hours of oral arguments Thursday in a separate ballot case, most of the justices appeared willing to side with Trump on the question of whether he can appear on the ballot, the Colorado case, or if his actions on January 6 made him ineligible under the 14th Amendment's insurrectionist ban. The courts may have to decide how it wants to handle the former president's immunity claim at the same time it's drafting an opinion on the ballot case. Together, the cases have thrust the court into the middle of this year's presidential election in a way that has largely managed to avoid since its decision in Bush v. Gore effectively decided the 2000 election between George W. Bush and former Vice President Al Gore. Okay. So they'll probably be looking to not be involved in a second case if they have to deal with a first one. It's just sort of interesting that this could happen that way. Let's see. Other things to share with you. There's also developments in the Florida case before the wackadoodle judge Aileen Cannon, where Daily Kos diarist Dan Kay has this contribution to add. Jack Smith traps Judge Cannon with her own prior work, as occasionally will happen. Aileen Cannon's prior work not particularly stellar, so that'll be funny if she says, well, I don't find that to be persuasive precedent because it's my work and I'm an idiot, so you're not going to be able to convince me of the propriety of adopting my own prior stance. But here we have Dan Kay's take on things. One of the many complaints against Judge Aileen, quote, loose Cannon, be careful with that one, is her lack of trial experience. However, when she was a federal prosecutor, she was involved in a case, United States v. Cannon, somehow, where she and her fellow prosecutors argued successfully to the circuit court to reject exactly the argument she has just accepted from Trump's lawyers. In the sort of ironic twist that would never sell in Hollywood, the defendant in that case also had the last name Cannon. So all the Cannons were roaring at the time. It's just they weren't the same one. Trump's lawyers asserted a selective prosecution argument, saying that Smith's prosecution of Trump was selective, and on behalf of both Smith and the DOJ, to bolster this case, they want extensive documents beyond the 1 million plus that the DOJ has already turned over. Jack Smith has critiqued Aileen Cannon's Mar-a-Lago ruling, according to reporting by MSN on this one. The crux of the matter lies in Trump's legal team seeking a wide array of documents allegedly to uncover political bias. This is the demand that Cannon approved and that Smith is now demanding she reconsider, a necessary step prior to appealing to the 11th Circuit. And then the MSN story continues. Judge Cannon, appointed by Trump, previously worked as a federal prosecutor on a case that set stringent limits on such expansive legal quests. The case involved 2 men arrested in a sting operation, with one challenging his conviction based on selective prosecution. This argument was later dismissed by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, underscoring the substantial burden of proof required for such claims. Smith, in citing that case, has caught Cannon in a trap of her own making, Dan says. Smith's team, now back to MSN, in referencing the case is seen as a tactical reminder to Judge Cannon of the legal precedent that she helped establish. Legal expert Robert A. Sanders, a law professor at the University of New Haven, views this as smart lawyering and, sure, use her own reasoning to foreclose this possibility. It's interesting. I probably should have gone direct to the MSN article on this one, because sometimes when these things get sliced and diced to make a slightly different point, it's not as easy to follow as it is when you're just reading straight through. But let me see if we can't jump over to the MSN coverage of this one, although I hate going through Microsoft news aggregators, because it's just difficult to tell where the original story is coming from, and when they repackage it so that they can grab more clicks. It really kind of bothers me, but let's see. Does this help make any more sense of things? In a significant legal maneuver, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has subtly referenced Judge Aileen Cannon's previous rulings in the ongoing Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. The complex situation has captivated national interest, yada, yada. This is garbage so far up to this point. The crux of the matter lies in Trump's legal team seeking a wide array of documents allegedly to uncover political bias in his prosecution, I suppose. Judge Cannon, appointed by Trump, as you know, previously worked as a federal prosecutor in a case that set stringent limits on such expansive legal quests. The case involved 2 men in a sting operation, one saying that he was being selectively prosecuted, and I guess the basic upshot of it was that the courts were having none of it. Smith's team, in referencing this case, is seen as a tactical reminder to Judge Cannon of the legal precedent she helped establish. Robert Sanders, this is not going anywhere, to be honest. Let's see. Who interprets? I thought this was, we've changed law professors on this one. Catherine Ross, professor emeritus at George Washington University Law School, notes the rarity of Cannon's involvement in such influential cases, given her limited courtroom experience. It is unusual that, given how few cases she's been involved in, one of her own would come back to haunt her. Anyway, she interprets Smith's strategy as a subtle nudge towards consistency in legal judgment. That was sorely lacking to this point. The episode highlights the intricate nature of legal proceedings, where past experiences and rulings significantly influence current decisions, if, you're a real judge. Which maybe not. While citing previous cases is common, referencing a judge's own rulings is a nuanced approach intended to remind them of established legal principles. Judge Cannon's recent conduct, particularly her initial reluctance to protect government witness identities, later reversed after DOJ warnings, adds complexity to the case. This behavior, that's a totally different story, by the way, still waiting in the wings. We haven't discussed that one. This behavior complicates the timeline for Trump's upcoming trials in New York and Washington, D.C. As the case unfolds, the legal community closely observes, with Smith's strategic use of Cannon's past work underscoring the complexities of this high-profile legal battle. Trump remains vocal on social media, criticizing the investigation as biased. The outcome of Judge Cannon's decisions on the document request will be crucial, potentially influencing the direction of this contentious and closely watched case. And to be honest with you, that was no better in clarifying what was going on here. So I guess that tells you you weren't likely to come up with a better product out of this, Dan, than you were handed by the Microsoft News Network here. Yeah, suffice to say, I guess the best way I can help you untangle that one, I mean, I'm confused by this just because they took a relatively straightforward issue and turned it into garbage, quite honestly. But basically what they're saying is Trump is, like always, just trying anything, throwing anything at the wall, seeing what will stick. And to delay his Florida trial, he is demanding that DOJ share with him documentation that may or may not exist, for one thing, and may or may not have any relevance to the case, for another, on the theory that, of course, they are only prosecuting him because he just happens to be the former president of the United States and in possession of vast amounts of classified material in his home. I mean, it's selective prosecution insofar as very few people ever face this particular charge. And lo and behold, by some magic, it only happens to former presidents of the United States who happen to be running against the current president of the United States for election in next November. Well, is it that, or is it that very few people are able to remove classified material from the White House and take it to their private home and store it away in violation of federal law? In fact, the club is pretty limited in terms of the number of people who can steal this stuff from the White House and then claim to have declassified it along the way. There's only one type of person that could apply to, and that would be former presidents of the United States. So in that sense, yes, the prosecution is a little bit selective. There are very few people who can be charged with this crime because there are very few people who can perpetrate this crime. As it happens, though, 100% of the former presidents of the United States during this particular period of time are, in fact, being charged with this. It's not selective prosecution at all. Every single former president who served in the White House between 2017 and 2021 is being charged. Nothing selective about it. That's another way of looking at it. At any rate, the real point here is that Judge Cannon and the 11th Circuit have had people plead to them this idea of selective prosecution in the past. They probably had a much better argument going for them because they were, of course, probably involved in a crime that many people commit. And some people are charged for it and some people are not, as opposed to the 100% charging rate that we have going in this situation. And the point here is that when it was an ordinary defendant, they were willing to say, no, this is well, we'll let Greg say it. Exactly.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. Your idea of there being a selective prosecution was very quickly dismissed. The judges didn't want to have anything to do with those claims. But now that their special patron is in front of the courts, all of a sudden, I guess it's hinted that maybe someone like Judge Cannon might, in fact, find validity in this idea of selective prosecution. And, well, he's just trying to head her off with the pass on that one. Okay, let's see. We'll see what else we can sneak in before the next break. Oh, we got a couple of things that are unidentified in Pocket that we got to click on. Oh, yeah, okay. And all right. Well, we're running right up against the next break, of course. And, of course, everything that I've got is rather lengthy. But there is one thing that was disguised by Pocket from our view when we had to click through, and something I can't believe we forgot to mention last week, that former Trump advisor Peter Navarro has been ordered to report to prison, although I don't recall him actually showing up yet, so maybe a date was set, but that was news last week, and we didn't get to say it. Holmes Libren, Devin Cole, and Caitlin Polentz reported this for CNN last Thursday. That was the 8th. Peter Navarro, former trade advisor to Donald Trump, who was convicted of contempt of Congress, has been ordered to report to prison after a judge denied Navarro's effort to stay out of prison while, of course, he appeals the conviction. Navarro was sentenced by Judge Amit Mehta in late January to 4 months behind bars after a jury in Washington, D.C. found him guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena related to the congressional investigation of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Defendant's request for release pending appeal is denied, Mehta wrote in his ruling on Thursday. Unless this order is stayed or vacated by the D.C. Circuit, defendant shall report to the designated Bureau of Prisons facility on the date ordered by the BOP. So they're handing it over to the Bureau of Prisons to set the date. I haven't seen that date set, but I got my work cut out for me in the next 2 minutes, I guess. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The answer is no. There's no news on the action, I guess the last action required from the Bureau of Prisons in determining the date on which Peter Navarro is supposed to report to jail. But everything I searched quickly anyway during the break on news on Navarro was 5-day-old news that he had in fact been sentenced to his 4 months and that the judge was not permitting him to stay out of jail. Although I guess there was still the possibility that he would be able to convince the D.C. Circuit to intervene on an emergency basis, and or that the Bureau of Prisons would take its sweet time in determining the date. But no word on whether a date has been set then. And I guess we'll try to do better in getting that news on the air when it happens. I suppose, but the day he actually reports, I suppose it would be too splashy a news event to miss. So keeping my fingers crossed, 1, that I see it when it happens, and 2, that it happens quickly. Okay. Couple of stories that could take up the rest of the day, week, month, depending on how long we want to read them. I should add this one here first, though. This could have been squeezed in place of the rather confusing read about the selective prosecution claim. But side by side, I guess, with that down in Florida, we have this development. Also, this time reported by NBC News, special counsel warning, it was hinted at in the selective prosecution claims story. The special counsel warning of significant and immediate threats to Mar-a-Lago case witnesses. Jack Smith's team also said, according to the subheader here, that sealed documents contain speculation about witness tampering. We've got to get this one on the record here, too. Catherine Doyle reporting for NBC. The special counsel prosecuting Donald Trump has asked the judge in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case to reconsider an order that the government argues could identify more than 24 witnesses and threaten their safety and testimony. Trump's lawyers have asked for unredacted documents to be turned over, which lawyers for special counsel Jack Smith want to block. This, I guess, is did this precede the previous story? Essentially, I mean, I guess this too is a demand for documents, and I don't know whether it's related to the attempt to show that there was a selective prosecution or not. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same request for documents, but it's starting to sound like it. So it might be that the chronology of the story is, in order to undergird the claim that there's selective prosecution, Trump has demanded documents that really he has no business getting a hold of. And remember also that this is a case of in which he's on trial for improperly handling government documents in the first place, and he's now asking for more government documents. And they are, in fact, as Smith points out, documents that might lead to or might end up enhancing his ability to threaten and intimidate witnesses against him. In other words, in a normal criminal case, we have certain witnesses who are going to testify against you. Well, I would like to have the names of those witnesses and maybe their locations as well, so that I can intimidate them, threaten to kill them, what have you. And the answer is no, we're not actually going to enable you to do that. Well, I have a special reason to be legally entitled to their names. Okay, I'd love to hear it. What is your excuse? Well, I think this whole thing is a selective prosecution, and in order to prove it, well, for some reason I need the list of witnesses against me. Not really sure how I'm going to use that or turn that into proof that this is selective prosecution, but just trust me, I need them. Well, ordinarily the answer is no, but you are talking about, one, Aileen Cannon, and two, Donald Trump appointed Aileen Cannon, and maybe calling in any number of favors on this one. So, here, the background on this one. Trump's lawyers have asked for unredacted documents to be turned over, which the lawyers for special counsel Jack Smith want to block. In a 24-page filing in federal court in Florida, prosecutors for Smith said that the court applied the wrong legal standard when U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, who is overseeing the case, ordered the unsealing of materials. Cannon issued an order in response on Friday that delayed her initial decision. She just went ahead and did what Trump wanted, and Smith reminded her, yeah, that may actually put witnesses in danger and facilitate witness intimidation. Oh, really? Okay, well, I guess I'll reconsider it, which is something. She may have just said no. The filing notes an exhibit that includes information about uncharged, potentially obstructive conduct by a defendant and speculation about witness tampering by an uncharged individual, and there are many, in his case in Florida. According to the prosecutors, this witness declined to have his interview recorded. Trump was charged last year along with Walt Nauta, a personal aide to the former president, and Carlos de Oliveira, who worked at Mar-a-Lago. All three pleaded not guilty. Smith argued that making the filings public would disclose the identities of witnesses prepared to testify against Trump, including career civil servants and former Trump advisors, and what they said to federal investigators and the grand jury, which would still be secret material at this point. The decision risks exposing them to significant and immediate intimidation after the government fought to keep their information private, according to the filing. And even had the government not fought in the past to keep it private, it would, of course, risk exposing them to significant and immediate intimidation, because that is what Trump does with everything and everyone. Revelation of these witnesses' identities or the substance of their interviews with the FBI dangerously risks exposing them, said the special counsel, pointing to a well-documented pattern of threats, harassment, and intimidation against those involved in the cases against Trump. Cannon has suffered similar death threats, prosecutors for Smith write. That's how, Judge, you'll know that this sort of thing can happen. Just the very fact that it's possible he may lose the case is enough for Trump's minions to threaten you with death. So imagine what they're doing to the witnesses. Other exhibits disclosed details about the August 8th search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and sex dungeon, where classified documents were seized, including the names of the FBI agents involved. We just need to have that, just to be sure, because we think it's selective prosecution because reasons. And if you just tell us the names of the FBI agents who conducted the search, we can come up with reasons why we think that they would be involved in a selective prosecution. We don't think we know who they are, but if you tell us, we can research their backgrounds and make attacks. So please let us know. Well, will they do it? Yet to be seen. They also would like the names of the 2 Justice Department attorneys who were present during the search and non-public details of the property's layout. Interesting. I don't know why exactly they would need that. It's their property. Let's see. I've lost track of the sentence here. Other exhibits disclose details. Okay, so some of the details of the layout are in the documents that they want. I don't think they need them for that purpose, but I guess that's in there. And to the extent that these documents have been in Smith's possession and have yet been publicized, he's blocked out non-public details about the layout of Mar-a-Lago, which is just, I guess, that's actually a nod to Trump's own safety, I guess, and just standard procedure, really. No real reason why that should be disclosed. Anyway, that presumably is not part of the reason that Trump wants them, although it may be part of the reason that Trump is requesting them, knowing that there's no real reason to give them to him, and so they might not, and then he can say, aha, see, they're hiding evidence. Trump has lashed out at the Gestapo agents who conducted the quote-unquote raid, and at the time of the search suggested that the government might seek to plant implicating documents. No need to do that, of course. Another exhibit discusses how 2 potential witnesses went about finding lawyers after Smith raised earlier questions over potential conflicts of interest for lawyers paid by Trump. After switching lawyers last year, one witness recanted previous false testimony and shared new information with the special counsel's team, which led to the superseding indictment. The filing also reveals how Trump's team is seeking to turn over an FBI report of an interview with a former Trump White House official who revealed privileged information about the classification process. Trump, of course, maintains that he declassified the sensitive government records that federal investigators seized from his residence after he left office. The special counsel has sought to block Trump's legal team from viewing certain information and has gone back and forth with the defense over how much information should be redacted or withheld in full. One potential witness is already facing threats, with Smith's team this week revealing in a separate filing that the U.S. Attorney's Office has opened an investigation into those threats. The case is set to go to trial in May, but risks being delayed. Oh, I can't believe it. Lawyers for Trump are seeking to dismiss the charges with a series of motions expected later this month and extend certain deadlines in the case. The scheduling conference is set for March 1st. And, well, you know what all the charges are. I don't need to spend any more time on that. So just another angle on the attempt to delay the Florida trial to keep up with. And now on to other issues which I think may be of interest here. Let's see. We have, there's a new entry in Talking Points Memos Now continuing series on what Cheesebro, as I like that pronunciation that Joan gave to us, has been up to. And, well, let's see. A relatively complex piece from Reason magazine and their Volokh conspiracy column on the possibilities of 14th Amendment litigation and what may end up being the last stop in all of that. Perhaps I'll save that one for a different day and spend some time, since we're kind of in the mode, having read a little bit about what the cheese has been up to or had been up to. We'll add a little bit more to that picture, although a lot of it does tend to overlap because, well, maybe because Cheesebro is basically doing the same thing over and over again. But here, another entry in this continuing series, this one titled The Ideas Man, How Cheesebro's Most Radical Theories Entered Trump Campaign Planning for Pence and January 6th. This entry added yesterday by Josh Kovensky over at TPM. And let's see what we can get on the record before we exit for the day. Some of the most radical legal theories which animated Donald Trump's 2020 coup attempt filtered in from a once obscure Wisconsin attorney. We're going to retell this story in order to make it large enough to warrant publication for a second day, I guess. Ken Chesebro, an appellate lawyer, and former acolyte of Harvard law professor Larry Tribe, that is an interesting twist, we've heard it before though, wound up as an ideas man for the Trump campaign's last most desperate grasps at power in late 2020 and early 21. A trove of documents obtained by TPM shows. It's a great job if you can get it, by the way, ideas man. He was the architect of the fake electors plan, and emails, texts, and memos reveal played a critical role in developing the idea that Mike Pence had the power, he didn't, to gum up Congress on January 6th. That, Chesebro claimed, would start a chain reaction that could somehow lead to Trump's re-inauguration on January 20th. A little bit of underpants gnome strategy involved in that one. The article shows... This article shows how some of the most radical ideas now associated with the January 6th coup, I guess, filtered into the Trump campaign through three people who have been identified as unindicted co-conspirators in Jack Smith's January 6th indictment. They are Chesebro, law professor John Eastman, and a third figure, Boris Epstein, longtime Trump surrogate attorney and political consultant who reportedly sent emails matching those sent by a figure described as a co-conspirator, that is to say, co-conspirator 6, in the Smith indictment. The trove of documents obtained by TPM reveals the division of labor between these three, Chesebro, the ideas man. Many of those ideas were divorced from the prior 150 years of practice, but Chesebro, that's good, outlined a vision of Pence's role and of stalemate in Congress, which gave the Trump campaign what it was looking for, with academic laurels to boot. That is, a shot at delaying the formalization of Biden's win for as long as possible. Epstein emerges as coordinator, tasking Chesebro with preparing legal memos and connecting him with Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani. To what avail, I do not know. Per the emails, Eastman largely begins to propose ideas after the fake elector scheme has been implemented and complements Chesebro's ideas while editing them and taking them to Trump's inner circle. TPM obtained the trove of documents after Michigan prosecutors received records from Chesebro as part of their investigation into efforts to overturn the election. Chesebro supplied the documents, which include emails, texts, and legal memos, to prosecutors. It's one tranche, everyone loves the word tranche, of evidence in a coup attempt that was much broader. It spanned months and involved hundreds of people and was provided as Chesebro sought to avoid prosecution in Michigan. The documents provide a look at the anatomy of the portion, I guess, of the coup attempt, which proceeded not through mobs at the Capitol or via angry tirades, but instead legal briefs and hidebound argumentation, not really, not bound by precedent of any kind, certainly, and which cast Vice President Mike Pence in a leading role. Epstein, a prominent Trump surrogate since the 2016 campaign, has largely managed to maintain a lower profile than the other co-conspirators with respect to his involvement in the legal portion of the coup attempt. He wasn't available for comment for this series. He's available, he just didn't comment. But the records show that he played a leading role in pulling together the legal theories that cast January 6th as a critical date, asking Chesebro on December 12th for a memo on VP's powers during joint session, and after receiving the now infamous Eastman memo, asking about steps that have to be taken before the 6th on this front. Chesebro also emerges from the emails and texts as a far more influential figure than previously understood. The records show that he provided substantial edits to the Eastman memo, which pushed the idea that Pence could unilaterally reject electoral votes on January 6th, and in the 3 days prior to the 6th, peppered Epstein and Eastman with law review articles about the vice president's ability to review and count electoral votes. On a normal January 6th, according to the Electoral Count Act, which he looked to suspend, of course, the vice president opens the electoral votes submitted by the states. Before a 2022 reform went into effect, One senator and one representative objecting to a particular state's results would lead to time-limited debate. Cheeseborough volunteered the idea that Pence could throw a wrench in this process by declining to open Biden votes from swing states, instead using the fake electoral slates that Cheeseborough convened as a reason not to open any votes from those states. And you should recall, or we should point out exactly how cynical that is, right? Well, there's confusion. You don't have to open any electoral votes from the 7 states where this happened on account of the confusion. You can claim to be a neutral arbiter. I don't know which ones are the real ones, so I won't open either of them. But reminder that the confusion was engineered by the person who told you. Remember, on January 6th, you need to claim to be confused. I will give you the fake documents that will underlie that supposed confusion. They created the fake confusion in order to stage the fake confusion on the 6th, and that's really rather cynical. Anyway, he brought this idea to an eager Trump campaign weeks ahead of the climactic series of meetings before January 6th, where Eastman and Trump sought to pressure Pence into stoking as much chaos as possible. The possibility that Pence might decline to open Biden votes at all was an option that Cheeseborough described as a fairly boss move. Gee whiz. The documents, combined with a 4.5-hour interview that Cheeseborough gave to Michigan prosecutors last year, reviewed by TPM, also reveal for the first time that the group received an early no from Pence's camp. Cheeseborough told prosecutors that he walked away from a call with a legal advisor to Pence 1 month before January 6th, with the distinct impression that Pence would not diverge from a single letter of the Electoral Count Act, which I guess is what led him to try to find a way to legally suspend it. Despite the early demurral from Greg Jacob, Pence's legal counsel, Cheeseborough spent the following weeks pushing for various ways that Pence could step beyond his authority to refuse to review electoral votes. Next up, Horatius at the bridge, I guess. Okay. Cheeseborough had entered the Trump campaign's post-election legal maneuvering in November via a lawsuit challenging the count in his home state of Wisconsin, an effort he worked on alongside an old friend of his, that was former Judge Jim Troupis. The early outline for how leverage might be exerted in January to force Congress to delay Biden's certification in favor of examining claims of voter fraud came via a previously unreported December 8th email to Troupis. It contained a rough sketch of the pressure campaign that came to pass. The Electoral Count Act, which specified Pence's role and time limits for debate, was unconstitutional and non-binding on Congress, Cheeseborough argued. It meant, he theorized, that if Republican senators and Pence cooperated, the January 6th election certification vote could be extended for days, perhaps until January 20th, at which point the Senate could resolve the impasse by electing Pence vice president. I mean, it would have to be a perfect storm, and everybody would have to ignore the law. But, you know, what he was counting on essentially was a nuclear option for the Electoral Count Act. If you can get a determined majority of the Senate to just say, to hell with what the law says, we're going to continue to debate, can you continue to do it? Well, physically, I guess, nobody is going to come in there and kick the door down and stop the Senate from debating. So does it have to have real legal underpinnings? Only insofar as you need the senators to hang together as a majority and feel like, or say the things that they need to say in order to make themselves feel like they have a legal basis, I guess. That's all there is to it. By contrast, if he has the will to do it, Pence could stand as Horatius at the bridge. That's a classical reference with which I'm not familiar, but I hope they'll explain it, and help ensure adequate time for debate. Cheeseborough wrote in the December 8th email, likening the vice president to, here we are, an ancient Roman soldier who defended a bridge into Rome during a battle, becoming wounded but saving the city in doing so. I'm sure that understates his achievements nicely, but it summarizes things. That ought to be enough. But what might induce Pence to bring Roman virtue into Trump world? Why, indeed. Cheeseborough wrote, that Pence could find justification for his bold move in fake slates of electors that the Trump campaign could convene from swing states. These electors would create the pretext of disputed victories, allowing Pence to refuse to open the Biden electors and thereby buy Trump potentially days or weeks of time. The fake electors would make Pence's exercise of his power to set the pace of the count look much more reasonable, Cheesebro wrote. Okay. Next up, a quick call with Pence's lawyer. Cheesebro did not wait long to see how his theory would fare in reality. One day after Cheesebro's emails to Troupis, December 9th, Epstein asked Troupis if he would be willing to prepare sample fake elector ballots for Wisconsin, and if he agreed, to do the same for 6 other states: Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. This is illustrative of how the plan actually came to pass and who was involved in doing it and how direct the connections were. That's helpful. Troupis said yes and forwarded Epstein's email to Cheesebro. Could he or another Wisconsin attorney do this for the other states? Oh, absolutely, Cheesebro replied. Cheesebro, believing, as he put it in a December 9th email to Troupis, that Pence was president of the Senate in 2016, arranged a call with Greg Jacob, Pence's legal advisor. Of course, that was not the case. Pence was not president of the Senate in 2016, but okay. 3 years later, Cheesebro recounted the conversation to Michigan prosecutors during a proffer interview. My immediate reaction was, well, I need to see the electoral votes that were cast in 2016, the last time this was done. Thinking, well, the president of the Senate, that's Pence. I'll reach out to his staff and they'll have copies. This is interesting. I mean, this is just some bad legal research, right? He's being asked to forge electoral college voting certificates and the forms that a real member of the electoral college might fill out in registering their vote. And he thought, okay, well, a good source for what those forms looked like would be, well, what did they look like last time? Okay, I mean, that's a reasonable basis for starting your forgery. I mean, you shouldn't be starting forgeries. That's not reasonable. But if you're going to forge documents, you might say, show me the real ones and I'll copy them. And that's what I'll make the forgeries look like. That's how you would do it. So where would I get the originals? And he decides to call Pence and Pence's office and say, show me the ones you read in 2016. Now, the answer to that, of course, is I didn't read them in 2016. I wasn't vice president. But even if I was, you could, I mean, if you wanted to keep your highly illegal endeavor more secret, maybe. I mean, this is just good advice. It's good advice for a bad act. But why not just go to the congressional record and say, show me the certificates as they were read on January 6, 2017. But of course, he's too much of a genius to do this. He'll just call somebody else and make them go to the congressional record. Because it's not like Mike Pence is walking around with this stuff in his pocket. Now, even had he been vice president, he still would not be keeping these things in his pocket. But whatever, this was a way to avoid doing your own research, which is extraordinarily dumb when you're trying to do a secret coup. Well, anyway, so that's what he does. I'll reach out to his staff and they'll have copies, Cheesebro recalled in a December 2023 interview. So I reached out and eventually Greg Jacob, who's the key lawyer for Pence, who ended up being in the meetings with Eastman, he and I had a nice discussion and he explained that actually the president of the Senate in 2016 was Biden and they were in his papers. So we don't have them. And it turned out that they were online in the archive because they're not his papers. They're just regular government documents. It's not like Biden keeps them. And yes, there's this thing called the congressional record where they actually keep notes on this stuff. Cheesebro added that after the flub, he gently suggested that Pence might decline to open the envelopes. Or, Cheesebro recalled, that Pence might skip the states in dispute and then lump them together at the end of the count to create a critical mass of states that need to be considered separately, even though, well, that would violate the Electoral Count Act. I detected no enthusiasm, Cheeseborough told prosecutors of Jacobs' response.
Enthusiasms.
It was very difficult to detect, of course. By that time, emails show others on the original Wisconsin team had found the certificates Cheeseborough was searching for on the National Archives website. Yes. I mean, Congressional Record will have them, but remember that a copy is sent to the National Archives. And you know what they do with those things? They archive them. Nationally, even, you might say. 3 years later, in an interview with Michigan prosecutors, Cheeseborough made this view of Pence clear. His view of Pence clear. Pence wouldn't do anything anyway because his lawyer wouldn't even take a state out of order. And that was because there's federal law prescribing exactly how the procedure will go. Well, gee whiz. He found that he was uninterested in deviating from federal law. Now, the next section, we won't be able to get through all the way, not much less all the way through the entirety of today's entry. But there is another entry to get to, too. We could spend the rest of the week on this. Enter Boris. Woo! This is where Boris Epstein comes in, I guess. The next day, December 10th, Troopus sent an email directing Cheeseborough to work with 2 Trump campaign attorneys, Justin Clark, whose name we just heard the other day for the first time, I think, a deputy campaign manager and attorney, and Boris Epstein, who we've heard of all along, an attorney for the president. Throughout, Epstein took on a coordinating role for Cheeseborough. He introduced Cheeseborough to Rudy Giuliani and helped facilitate the fake electors effort. Emails and texts from the days before December 14th, the day the fake electors convened, show Epstein coordinating with Cheeseborough and a coterie of other Trump world figures, including Mike Roman, and that's how I guess his name got into the mix. All right, that's all we can bring you for today, but we are getting some details about who exactly is to blame for the fake electors effort, and I guess the only question is, would Boris Epstein ever say that he was doing this at the direction of the president? Probably not, though almost certainly it was the case. But I guess almost certainly, or just as certainly, Trump did not understand and could never have explained it himself. That's probably why he charged Epstein with doing the work.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, up next, of course, is Justice Putnam taking the microphone for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, with a varying menu of items for you today, including, of course, the fact that the Supreme Court's quick response, if there is one, to Trump's last-minute motion could spell disaster for the crook. That would be fantastic to hear about. Stay tuned.